I sat at a corner table in a nightclub, sipping a martini from a thin glass that caught the neon light's reflections. The dimness, scented with expensive perfume, alcohol, and something subtly illicit, enveloped me like an old blanket, one you should throw away but can't because it feels so familiar. The music pounded in my ears, the bass vibrating in my chest, and the spotlights singled out the dancers on stage, their practiced moves, glistening with sweat. My designer purse lay casually on the table, and in it, a wad of hundreds I was about to spend. Money slipped through my fingers like sand, but I couldn't stop. Linda, 39 years old, a slender blonde with blue eyes and a big chest, which I emphasized with low-cut dresses. On the outside, I was a woman who lived life to the fullest, but inside, there was a void I tried to fill with these nights. My life resembled a boutique window. Everything shines, but there's nothing behind the glass. 5 years ago, a divorce from my ex, a lawyer with a tyrannical streak, left me with a sizable bank account, a house on the outskirts of Los Angeles with a view of the hills, and a wardrobe packed with designer clothes. But it also left loneliness, which I drowned in the nightclub. I came here a couple of times a month, sometimes more often, when the longing became unbearable. This was my guilty pleasure, sitting in the shadows, throwing bills on stage, catching the eyes of guys who knew how to play along so I'd spend more. They smiled, winked, sometimes came over to chat, and I felt like a queen. Even if only for a few hours, even if for money, but a queen nonetheless. My savings melted like ice in my martini, but I didn't know how to save. Life seemed too short to be economical. That evening, I came to the club in a mood that could be described as whatever. Tired of work, I ran a small jewelry business that brought in income but wore me out. Tired of empty evenings when I sat in my house, scrolling through social media and looking at other people's staged lives. The nightclub was my refuge, a place where I could forget myself. I ordered a martini, settled into a soft leather sofa, and waited for the show. The dancers changed, their faces merging into a monotonous kaleidoscope. I threw money without really thinking, just to support the ritual. But then he came on stage. I noticed him immediately. Curly dark hair, slightly tousled, falling onto his forehead, green eyes shining in the dimness, and a body, toned but not over-muscled, moved with a natural grace that grabbed you more than forced, rough swagger. He was new. I knew all the regulars on the scene, and this was the first time I'd seen him. There was something genuine about him. Not just a pretty face, but something deeper that made me sit up straight and set my glass down. While he danced, I couldn't look away. My hand reached for my purse, and I threw a couple of hundreds on stage without even counting. The bills fell at his feet. He caught my eye and gave a slight smile. Not that practiced smile that everyone here used, but with a touch of amusement, as if he knew I wasn't just here for the show, and he found it interesting. Hey, do you always tip so generously? Or am I just lucky? His voice, when he came down from the stage and approached my table, was low, with a slight rasp. Only for those who know how to move, I smiled, trying to sound casual, although everything inside me was boiling. He chuckled, wiping the sweat with a towel, and went backstage, leaving me with the feeling that I had just lost some kind of game. His name was Kyle, as I found out later, and he got stuck in my head. I sat there, looking at the empty stage, and felt something stir inside. Usually, I didn't remember faces, didn't get hung up on one guy. But Kyle, he was different. A couple of days later, I returned. I couldn't not return. Again, the nightclub. Again, the dimness, the smell of alcohol, and the same corner table, which I now considered mine. I ordered a martini, but I drank it slowly, waiting. My heart was pounding when I thought about whether I'd see him again. And he came out. The same curls, the same green eyes, the same magnetism. I threw more on stage than usual, barely thinking. My savings melted, but I pushed those thoughts away. When he came down to collect the money, I waved to him, inviting him over. He hesitated but came over anyway, the towel hanging casually on his shoulder, his skin glistening with sweat. "You again," he squinted at me. "Is this like my personal fan club now?" Maybe I shrugged, feeling my cheeks burn. "Depends on how long you keep impressing me." He smirked but didn't linger. He was called backstage. I stayed sitting, clutching my glass, and realized that this was becoming an obsession. His reserve only added fuel to the fire. I wanted to break through that wall, find out what was behind it. It wasn't just attraction, although, damn, he was hot. It was something more, and it frightened me. The following weeks, I came more often than usual. Every time, the same table, the same martini, the same ritual. I spent more and more. The bank account dwindled, but I couldn't stop. Kyle became my obsession. I caught his glances through money, tried to talk. Sometimes he answered, sometimes he just nodded and left. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. After his number, I went to the bartender, slipped him 100, and asked him to give Kyle a note. "Want to talk." After the shift. By the exit. Linda. I waited by the back door, nervously fiddling with the strap of my designer purse. The Los Angeles night air was cool, and I wrapped myself in a coat that cost more than some people earned in a month. The street was quiet, only the muffled bass from the club was audible. I felt silly, like a schoolgirl waiting for a guy after class, but it was too late to back down. When Kyle came out, in jeans and a worn leather jacket, I almost forgot how to breathe. His curls were slightly damp, as if he'd just taken a shower, and I caught myself thinking that I wanted to run my hand through them. "So, what's the rush?" He put his hands in his pockets, looking at me with a slight squint. "I want to get to know you." "Not here. Coffee tomorrow." I blurted out, feeling my voice tremble, but trying to keep a straight face. He looked for a long time, as if considering whether it was worth it. Then he nodded. "Name the place, short, without unnecessary words." I named a coffee shop a couple of blocks from the club, with cozy sofas and a view of the city at night. He left without saying anything more, leaving me standing by the back door with a wildly beating heart. I knew this was just the beginning, and it frightened me as much as it excited me. I sat at Moonlight Brew, the very place I'd told Kyle about, nervously twisting the edge of a napkin. The table by the window, overlooking the twinkling lights of Los Angeles, was my strategic choice. Cozy, but not too intimate, so as not to scare him off. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with a hint of vanilla from the pastries. My Gucci bag lay next to me, and I realized I'd spent on it an amount that could cover a month's rent for someone like Kyle. Money had always been my weak point. I spent it thoughtlessly, as if trying to buy something I was missing. But today I wasn't here for that. I was waiting for him, and this feeling, a mix of anticipation and fear, was new. Kyle walked in precisely on time, wearing the same jeans and worn leather jacket I'd seen him in at the back entrance of the club. His curls were slightly tousled by the wind, and his green eyes scanned the coffee shop until he spotted me. He sat down across from me, ordered black coffee without sugar, and looked at me with the same light mockery that I remembered from Night Fire. "So, Linda, what's the deal? Want to hire me for a private dance?" There was a joke in his voice, but his eyes remained serious, as if he was testing me. "I'm just curious." You don't seem like the typical club guy. There's something real about you, I shrugged, trying not to reveal how much I was drawn to him. He scoffed, sipping his coffee, and fell silent for a second, as if deciding whether to open up. Then he began to speak. Kyle was a chef, or rather, wanted to be one. He'd studied at culinary school, dreamed of opening his own cafe, but life had taken a different turn. Debts for a small apartment in a less than prestigious part of Los Angeles suffocated him, and working at Nightfire was the only way to earn quickly. He hated the scene, the glances, the falsity, but he had no choice. His words were honest, without embellishment, and I felt something inside me tremble. I was used to polished guys who played a role, and Kyle was alive. I told him about myself a little. About my jewelry business, about how I love beautiful things, about how sometimes I didn't know where to go with myself. I didn't mention the divorce or the emptiness that gnawed at me at night. That was too personal. But he listened attentively, didn't interrupt, and his green eyes seemed to see more than I wanted to show. When we said goodbye, he threw out a parting line. If you want to chat more, I'm okay with it. Just without those stacks of your money, okay? I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my chest. We started seeing each other. Not immediately, not as a couple, but as two people who had accidentally found each other in this chaotic city. The Moonlight Brew coffee shop became our place. The same table by the window, the same Los Angeles lights outside the glass. I started to notice that I was spending less at Nightfire, going there less often, because I was waiting for our meetings. Kyle told me about his life, about how he cooked for friends in high school, how he dreamed of a restaurant with simple but soulful food. I caught myself wanting to try his cooking, wanting to see him not on stage, but in the kitchen with flour on his hands. One day, he invited me to his place. His apartment was tiny, on the outskirts, with worn linoleum and old furniture, but clean and cozy. The kitchen smelled of spices, and there was a bottle of cheap wine on the table. He was making pasta with homemade sauce, and I sat on a chair, watching how skillfully he wielded the knife. You really spend a lot of money on all sorts of nonsense, Linda. Maybe it's time to slow down. He said this without taking his eyes off the basil he was cutting, but I felt a sting. He was right. I spent thousands on dresses I wore once, on bags that gathered dust in the closet. But instead of snapping back, I nodded. Maybe you're right. That night changed everything. After dinner, when the wine was finished and the music from his old speaker played something slow, he looked at me differently. Without mockery, without the wall he always kept. We kissed right on his kitchen, amidst the smells of spices and cooling pasta. His hands were warm, and his curls tickled my forehead. It wasn't just passion, it was as if I had finally found something I was missing. Later, lying in his bed, I looked at the cracks in the ceiling and thought that for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. But not everything was so smooth. I began to notice how Kyle tensed up when the conversation turned to money. He hated when I offered to help, although I saw how he counted every penny. One day in the coffee shop, when I ordered desserts for both of us, he frowned. Linda, I can pay for myself. Don't make me a rescue project. I wanted to object, but remained silent, feeling how his words touched something inside. He was proud, and it both admired and angered me. Meanwhile, my friends, with whom I sometimes hung out, began to look askance at my stories about Kyle. One of them, Melanie, with whom I shared a glass of wine in my home, couldn't hold back. Seriously, Linda? A stripper? Have you fallen for a boy who shakes his, but for money? Her words were like a slap in the face. I threw the glass on the floor. The glass shattered on the marble floor, and Melanie fell silent, but her look said it all. She thought I had lost my mind, and maybe she was right. But I didn't care. Kyle wasn't just a stripper. He was a man who made me feel alive. I started helping him, despite his protests. I transferred a little money to his account to cover part of the apartment debt. He was angry, but I saw how he began to breathe easier. And surprisingly, I myself began to count my expenses. Kyle, without knowing it, made me think. I stopped buying another pair of Louboutin shoes, started saving money for the first time in years. It was strange, but pleasant, to feel in control of my life. Our meetings became closer. The passion between us burned brighter. I loved to visit him after his shift, when he, tired but satisfied, was cooking something simple, and I sat in his kitchen, inhaling the smells of food. But I knew that something bigger awaited us, and it was scary. His world was full of problems, and mine of prejudices. And I wasn't sure if we could overcome it. I sat in Kyle's kitchen, leaning against the worn countertop as he kneaded the pizza dough. The smell of yeast, olive oil, and freshly cut herbs filled his tiny apartment, mixing with the warm light of an old lamp above the table. Outside, Los Angeles glittered with lights like a giant Christmas tree, and I found myself thinking that this simple kitchen felt cozier than my own home with its marble floors and designer furniture. My Gucci bag, which I now carried less often, lay in the corner, and I was proud that I hadn't bought anything extra for a month. Kyle, without knowing it, had changed me. His habit of counting every penny, his stubborn desire to live within his means, made me look at my life differently. I started keeping a budget, recording my expenses in an app on my phone, and to my surprise, it brought relief. My bank account stopped dwindling like snow in March, and for the first time, I felt that I was controlling my life, not just spending it on glitz and glamour. Kyle, standing at the stove, glanced at me over his shoulder. "You seem pensive today. Everything okay?" I smiled, shrugging my shoulders. "Just thinking about how you made me organized." He laughed, wiping his hands on a tomato sauce and flour-covered apron. "Well, someone had to curb your Gucci habits." His joke was light, but there was truth in it. I had really changed, and it was his doing. His simplicity, his honesty, it all infected me like a virus, but one I didn't want to be cured of. Our relationship deepened. The passion between us burned brighter every day. We spent more and more time together, and not just in his apartment or at Moonlight Brew, where the same table by the window became our ritual. I picked him up after his shifts at Nightfire, and we raced through the night city, listening to old rock music from the speakers of his beat-up car. But most of all, I loved the moments when he cooked. His kitchen, with its smells of spices, the clatter of dishes, and a slight mess, became my refuge. One evening, he was kneading dough for bread, and I was sitting on the table, swinging my legs. Flour settled on his curls, and I couldn't resist. I pulled him to me, and we kissed right there, amidst the spilled flour. The apron fell to the floor. Flour flew around the kitchen like snow, and his hands slid over my body, leaving warm trails. He pulled me to the countertop, and I felt the heat of his skin, his breath on my neck. It wasn't just passion. It was a storm that washed away everything except the two of us. Later, lying on the floor among the flour, I looked at the cracks in the ceiling and thought that I had never felt so alive. We laughed, brushing the flour off each other, and I realized that I wanted to spend every free minute with him. But not everything was so rosy. My friends, with whom I sometimes hung out, began to look askance at my stories about Kyle. Melanie, with whom I barely communicated anymore, crossed all boundaries. At one of those social gatherings where I went out of politeness, another acquaintance, Sarah, whispered to me over a glass of champagne. "I heard that Melanie is telling everyone that you're sponsoring some boy from a adult entertainment club. Is that true?" Her eyes burned with curiosity, but there was also mockery in them. I squeezed the glass so hard that it almost cracked. "And didn't you try thinking for yourself instead of listening to Melanie?" I turned and walked away, feeling their gazes boring into my back. That evening, I returned home, threw my shoes into the corner, and they hit the wall with a crash, leaving a scratch on the paint. I burst into tears, not because I was ashamed, but because I was tired of their poison. These women, with their perfect hairstyles and fake smiles, were ready to tear me apart for choosing my own life, not their rules. Kyle felt that something was wrong when I came to him the next day. I told him about the gossip, about how they were discussing me behind my back. He was silent, but his green eyes darkened. "If you have to endure this because of me, maybe we should." He didn't finish, but I understood. "No," I interrupted, grabbing his hand. "I won't let them ruin this." He nodded, but I saw that he was tormented by guilt. That night, we were again in his kitchen, and passion covered us with a new force. I sat on the table, he stood between my legs, and the flour flew all over the place again as we lost ourselves in each other. It was as if we were trying to prove that no one and nothing could separate us. Everything changed when he got an offer. A small restaurant in downtown Los Angeles was looking for a chef, and one of his friends, who knew about his talent, recommended Kyle. He passed the interview, and he was taken on a trial period. I saw how he was transformed. His eyes were burning. He talked about the menu, about new recipes, about how he wanted to prove that he could be more than just a dancer at a club. I was happy for him, but in my heart, I was afraid. What if he got on his feet and decided that he didn't need me? That I, with my 39 years and baggage, would only be a memory of the past, which he would want to forget. One evening, he invited me to the restaurant where he started working. It was a cozy hall with wooden tables, soft light, and the smell of fresh pastries. He prepared a tasting menu for me, from cream soup with truffle oil to dessert, and every bite was imbued with his soul. When I tasted his tiramisu, I almost cried. It was the best thing I had ever eaten in my life. "You're a genius, Kyle. Why aren't you a chef yet?" I said it half jokingly, but he looked at me seriously. "Because I needed to meet you. You gave me a chance." I felt my heart clench. At that moment, I realized that I loved him. And it was scary because love made me vulnerable. But the gossip didn't stop. Melanie crossed all boundaries when she sent me a message. "You're shaming yourself, Linda. He's only with you for the money." I deleted it, but the words stuck in my head like a splinter. I began to doubt, despite everything that was between us, our nights, our conversations, our passion. And then Kyle said he wanted to talk. His voice was serious, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Something told me that this conversation would be a turning point, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what he would say. I sat in the Moonlight Brew coffee shop in the same spot, watching the Los Angeles lights outside. My Gucci bag was on the table, but it was just a bag now, not a symbol of a past life where I tried to buy happiness. Kyle walked in, a little out of breath. His curls were tousled by the wind, and his green eyes were shining with something new, a mix of determination and vulnerability. He sat down, ordered his usual black coffee, no sugar, and started talking without giving me time to guess what was on his mind. "Linda, I've been thinking about us." His voice was firm, but his fingers nervously twisted the edge of the napkin. "You changed my life. If it wasn't for you, I'd still be at that adult entertainment club, counting down the days until the next payment." But I don't want you to think I'm with you for the money. I love you, and I don't care what your friends say or anyone else. I want us to be together for real." I looked at him, and tears burned my eyes. Melanie and her mean messages, the gossip, the sideways glances at society dinners, it all suddenly seemed so small, so insignificant. I took his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin. "Kyle, I love you too, and I don't care what they think. I want to be with you." He smiled, and his smile was pure, sincere joy, without the mocking tone I'd seen at the beginning of our relationship. We sat in the coffee shop, holding hands, and I felt that, for the first time in a long time, everything was in its place. Outside, Los Angeles continued to live its nightlife, but for me, there was only this moment and him. After that conversation, our life took off with new force. Kyle quit Nightfire, and I saw a weight lifted from his shoulders. His job at the restaurant became permanent, and he began to rise, from line cook to sous chef in a few months. He came home smelling of spices and olive oil and talked about new recipes, about how he dreamed of opening his own cafe. I supported him, but now not with money, but with faith in him. Thanks to Kyle, I myself changed. His habit of counting every penny infected me, and I learned to control my spending. I stopped buying designer dresses and shoes that I'd wear once and started putting money aside. My jewelry business began to bring in more because I became more attentive to detail, and our joint savings grew, for his cafe, for our life. For the first time, I felt that I had a goal, not just a desire to fill a void. Our passion didn't fade, it only grew stronger. I loved to go to his restaurant after his shift, when he, tired but satisfied, was preparing something just for us. One day, he called me to the kitchen after closing, and we found ourselves again among flour and spices, like in those early days. He pressed me against the work table. Flour settled on my dress, and I laughed while he kissed my neck. Dishes clinked when I touched a bowl, and it crashed to the floor with a loud noise, but we didn't care. It wasn't just physical, it was a connection that grew every day. I felt desired, needed, loved, and every such moment was proof that we were made for each other. Melanie and her gossip remained in the past. I broke off all contact with her, and most of my former friends gradually disappeared from my life. Those who stayed accepted Kyle, seeing how he made me happy. One day, I brought them to his restaurant, and when they tasted his food, from cream soup to signature tiramisu, their skepticism melted away. Sarah, who once spread nasty rumors, whispered to me over a glass of wine, "Damn, Linda, he's really talented. And he's a great guy." I smiled, feeling proud of him. Those words meant more than she could imagine because they confirmed what I knew from the very beginning. Kyle was special. We moved in together to my house on the outskirts of Los Angeles, and Kyle brought life to it. His old speaker played rock music, the kitchen smelled of spices, and in the evenings we sat on the terrace, looking at the hills, wrapped in a single blanket. He taught me to cook, or at least tried, because I kept distracting him with kisses and pots were forgotten on the stove. Our finances also came into order. My business flourished, and Kyle, with his new salary and our joint savings, finally closed all his debts. We started planning his cafe, small, cozy, with wooden tables, an open kitchen, and his signature tiramisu on the menu. I helped him with design ideas, and we spent evenings sketching on napkins, laughing at my crooked drawings. One evening, when we were lying in bed, he turned to me, his curls tickling my forehead. "You know, Linda, I never thought I'd find someone like you. You're like my second chance." I snuggled up to him, feeling the warmth of his body. And you're mine. We fell asleep, embracing, and I knew that this wasn't just a romance. It was forever.